Welcome, affiliated listeners, to another exciting episode of the Affiliated Podcast. As we get close to the Christmas season, this is our last recording of the year, at least that I'll be a part of. I don't really know what Thomas is doing. Thomas, what are you doing? By the way,
I want to do a ton of podcasts without you, Kyle. So.
Ton of them, just tons of episodes. They're all going to be 5-minute podcasts of Thomas saying mean things about me. I think that's leading up to Christmas. But no, we are joined today. We're going to have an amazing conversation. I think one that's huge around this time of year, we get a lot of people that are reflecting. They're thinking about what they're going to do next. And oftentimes that next transition is, how do you go from where your business is right now, 6 figures, 7 figures, 8 figures, to the next step, the next benchmark. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. How to go from 6 figures to 7 figures, from 7 to 8, and even from 8 to 9 with a high-powered sales team, which is exciting stuff. Exciting, right, Thomas?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. See, that's exactly the excitement I was looking for.
I've been a high-powered salesperson. I've not built a sales team, though, so I'm excited to dive into it.
Yeah. Yes. So we're talking about a fleet of Thomases. So for those that want to know about their fleet of Thomases, we should introduce our guest today, which is Rich Kerr. Rich, how are you doing today?
Hey, guys. How you doing? Kyle, thanks for having me.
Super excited to have you, Rich. So I'm going to let Rich introduce himself and talk a little bit more about. Before that, I want you guys to know that Rich is going to be sharing with us again exactly how you could go from the solopreneur to making your first hires, or wherever step you're in. It's going from 6 to 7, 7 to 8, and 8 to 9. Huge jumps in your business, huge changes in your business. And Rich has seen and knows exactly how to help people get to those stages. So really exciting stuff. But before we kind of jump into that, Rich is a great guy to talk to. We'd love to hear a little bit how you got to this podcast today, besides waking up, getting in your conference room, but how the business went from starting to this moment, kind of what your journey was.
Yeah. So, I started out in sales before the law led me to have a driver's license, actually back when I was 15.
Nice. So before you could drive, you were selling. So selling people on getting you a car.
Yeah. So I started out in a call center. And selling specialty advertising products to small and medium-sized businesses all throughout the United States and Canada. I was raised by a single father who owned 10 different businesses, only made 3 of them work. So at a young age, I learned a lot about what not to do. At any rate, I stayed in that business for quite some time. By the time I was 21, I broke my first 6 digits, which isn't as big a deal today as it was back then. I think we're talking 1985. And by the time I was 23,
that's like 7 figures in this day and age with inflation.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. At any rate, by the time I was 23, I had 250 salespeople working under me. Stayed in that business for quite some time. After I left that industry, I got into the financial industry where I was selling big ticket investments to high net worth individuals. So I did that for about 12 years. Probably one of the highlights of that career is I sat on the board of a commercial real estate firm here in Houston, Texas. Small firm, asset base of about $3.5 billion in assets. And I basically created a team that I was the director of investor relations. So I sat on the board of the company. And I created a team that over about a 3.5-year, 4-year period, we raised just under $40 million from high net worth individuals.
Nice.
And so, I did that
kind of
for
a small amount.
Yeah. And I'm also former president of the National Catastrophe Association. After I finished my tour with them, I actually stumbled across my first, what I call educator. Throughout this conversation, I'm probably going to refer to different, info marketers, educators, public speakers, gurus, whatever label you want to put on these folks these days, right? And so I ran across my my first one. He specialized, he's actually here in Houston. He specialized in teaching people how to buy small and basically buy and sell small apartments.
Okay.
And so I really knew nothing about the business. It was a small operation. He had about 4 to 5 employees. He was doing about $600,000 to $700,000 actually in the previous year. And I literally started working with him right after the first of the year. Mm-hmm. And he had no salespeople. All he had was he was doing webinars, doing a lot of recorded webinars, doing a lot of JVing with other educators in the real estate field. He all he did was, besides that, he would do one live event once a quarter with one salesperson in the back of the room while he's on stage.
Oh, wow.
So,
okay.
When I interviewed with the guys, like, so do you have any sales presentations? No. Do you have any product description? Not really. Do you have any salespeople I can listen to? No. right? So I kind of really had to go in there and just figure this whole thing out on my own. And after a few days, I started to get the hang of it a little bit. And he told me in the interview he'd done about 670,000 last year, and his goal for this year was 1 million. And so, like I said, after a couple of months, I really started getting the hang of things. This is all by over the phone. And after he heard what after he saw what I was able to accomplish with the sales, he moved that 1 million to $2 million for his goal that year.
Oh,
We
nice.
clocked out. So we clocked out at the end of that year about 80,000 short of that 2 million. I did about 44% of the production myself personally for that year.
Wow.
The next year we went into it. We did 3.2 million. I did about 54% of the sales production myself personally. And also I started doing some of his live events with him as well. And so really over about a 24-month period, we did about $5 million, starting out with just a small operation of 4 or 5 people, and built it up to an operation with about 65 people in a couple of different offices throughout the country.
Oh, nice.
And so I used to, and this is kind of how I started my business. I used to sit in, my little cubicle, pitching away all day, every day, selling training, coaching, and mentoring. And I used to sit about, 10, 15 feet away from his JV, his JV salesperson, right? Where they would contact other educators, try to schedule JV webinars. And so I'd hear her hang up, I'd hear what she was saying and how to try to get these JVs going. And she'd hang up the phone. And I didn't know anything about the business, right? Short of being an attendee one time way back when I was in my early 20s, and I bought some back then books and tapes, which, I'm like a lot of other students, read the first module and,
It came in like the plastic container that you opened up and has that right with the tapes. Yeah.
At any rate, I was like your standard student, I did the first module and never touched it again. And it sat there and collected dust. But so that was my only experience with the business. At any rate, so I would hear her hang up the phone after talking with, XYZ educator. And I'd ask her, I said, well, I heard you talking to Mike so-and-so. By the way, how many sales guys does he have? And she would say none. And then a few days later, I'd ask her, hear her hang up the phone, ask her same question. How many sales guys does Bob so-and-so have? None. And finally, I went to lunch with her about a week or two later. And this is, by the way, after I'd been with the company for some time. And I heard you talking to Mike so-and-so. How many, educators, or excuse me, how many salespeople does he have? She goes, Rich, you keep asking me the same question over and over. So let me just kind of set it straight for you so you can stop asking me this. She says 80% of the people that I deal with, these other educators, when trying to schedule these JVs, none of them have salespeople. And I came from a world where without a sales team, you don't really have a company, right? So I said, you got to be kidding me. Why? She goes, well, I asked them the same thing, and they told me it's just, really hard to get good quality salespeople. And, that's kind of when the light bulb went off. And I said to myself, why am I selling for one of these folks when I could be selling for all of them? And that's what kind of created the idea of opening the company to where we're basically a high profile sales force for hire. Right. So if you need if you already got your marketing dialed in and you've already got your offer dialed in and you got something that's working, and you want to scale from there, you would bring us in and we're basically an Atwater sales force for you. So that's kind of how I got started in the business.
That is awesome. I love that, because I think so many times, it's just, I think lots of us get really caught up in, you have to have a certain way or replicate what other people are doing. Yet so much of business is seeing and acting on opportunity. And you could see the opportunities to continue to ask that question. I'm always so curious. I'm kind of curious what made you start asking it, because obviously I think you started to know what the answer was when you were asking the question over and over and over again. But seeing opportunity and being like, that is where it's at. I mean, we've been on these interviews for a while now, and outside of this, the amount of successful entrepreneurs we talk with, it feels like that is one of the number one things consistently happens. It's like work, but it's the people that see the opportunity and strike on it that always make a huge difference. So that's fantastic. Oh, I thought Thomas was leaning to say something. See, it's when we're still learning, even as we do this for almost 2 years remotely. So with that, I think let's kind of jump in, because you've obviously seen a lot of different companies, not only from ones you've been a part of, but also now as you're the sales team for hire, you're bringing in so many different businesses to different stages. So to break it down, I think we really want to talk about that transition thing of how do you go from 6 to 7. So let's really break that band down first, Rich. So as we kind of define it, when we think of the 6-figure entrepreneur, I mean, I know I would think of somebody that's probably solopreneuring. Maybe they're similar to that guy that you talked to. They have some team members, but none of them are oriented around sales. They're probably just oriented around doing stuff that individual didn't want to do, not necessarily things that are expanding the business. So walk me through kind of how you take what you see a 6-figure business is most likely doing, how you define what that person looks like, and what they should be doing to go to the 7 figures, and kind of have a similar story to the guy that you started working with had.
Yeah, so to be candid with you, a lot of the 6-figure businesses that I see aren't even as far along as he was. Normally, they're a one-man show, and they're literally doing everything. They are, writing the copy. They're running their own marketing. They're doing their, own presentations and their own webinars. They are doing all the fulfillment themselves. They're handling the support and the customer service. They may have maybe one administrative assistant or kind of a right-hand person or a VA or two, but that's more or less it. And they're normally doing somewhere between $20,000 and maybe $70,000 a month in revenue. So they're really at that infancy stage, and they are also not living much of a life. Doing all of that themselves. They really just wake up every day having to do what they have to do, which is work in the business, instead of doing what they want to do, which is fulfill their dream by working on the business. And so, they're kind of pigeonholed, and if they don't make some kind of move, they know that they can only, they're human, right? So they can only do this for so long before they're going to hit burnout. And so they really kind of have no choice but to start hiring staff and expanding from there. Normally, the biggest solution to that problem is to start bringing on salespeople. And the reason is that the sales process, whether they're doing the sales themselves or not, some are not, and their webinars are doing so well. They got their marketing dialed in so well, whether it's cold traffic and or JVing, doing affiliates, or they've got all three figured out. Or they might be doing some of the sales themselves. The problem with it is that without salespeople, it's very difficult to scale from there. And two, if they are doing the sales themselves, the problem with sales is that it's extremely, extremely time consuming. So, if you picture yourself with 5 or 6 or 7 appointments that day that are sales calls, that's typically going to eat up somewhere between 6 and 8 hours of their time for the day. And then in the meantime, they've got to do all of the things that, create the sales, right? With respect to the marketing, with respect to fulfillment, support, clear down to, your traditional activities that you have to do for a business, clear down to the bookkeeping, right? And so at that point, what they basically have to do is they have to shift from basically being a one-man operation and into being a real business, right? And so in order to do that, that's, like I said, they got to start bringing on salespeople. And so probably the 3 biggest mistakes that I see when they start to go through that.
Well, real fast, Rich, I want to stop you before you go into the mistakes. I think it's interesting. One that I think oftentimes people hear, the first hire at that point should be a salesperson. And I'm curious, because I think a lot of times people think, you kind of mentioned they already have a VA, so we'd scratch that one. That's normally the first hire. But a lot of times people might think, well, it should be a copywriter or a media buyer or, an operations person or something like that. So you kind of mentioned with sales, it's time consuming. Is there any other things that if someone's like, well, I'm not sure it should be a salesperson first, outside of the time consumption, can you think of maybe another big reason why someone should go with a salesperson first and then transition to kind of some of the mistakes that people make when they go to hire those folks?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things besides freeing up their time. The other thing is obviously it's going to create a lot more revenue for you. A lot actually of the educators that I deal with, They're selling, and the main reason that they're successful at selling, if they're selling, is that they're the face of the company. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so, but most of the time, they're really not very good salespeople. So
Mm-hmm.
there are times, because they are the face of the company, they actually will end up selling more than any salesperson they're going to hire, just due to the fact that they're the face of the company. And at
Mm-hmm.
other times, they will actually get outperformed by the salespeople if they hire good enough ones and they're trained well enough, depending on the experience level of which they hire. I will say one thing I probably should back up, maybe that I didn't touch on is, maybe they're not doing the marketing. Maybe maybe they have an agency or something that's doing some of that for them. But it really just it prevents them from it. It's definitely, without that, they're not going to have the freedom of being able to really build the business. And again, they're just going to end up hitting burnout over time. So
Mm-hmm.
hopefully that answers
Yeah.
your question.
No, definitely. So let's talk about some of the pitfalls of hiring, because I kind of see what you're saying. I think one of the areas I really want to emphasize that stood out to me is it's directly, sometimes hiring can be really scary as an entrepreneur. It's going to cost you a lot of money. You now, your success now benefits or is reliant on other individuals beyond yourself. So it's a scary hire. A salesperson, because the fact that if you hire a salesperson, they're going to bring in more revenue, is definitely an easier hire in terms of, at least they're not good. They should be able to pay for themselves and then some, right? So I think that's one that always seems a pretty interesting benefit to going after a salesperson. So that being said, you can make a lot of mistakes. What are some of the mistakes that you've seen people make, and what should they do to avoid turning that first hire or that hire of a first salesperson from taking their business to 7 figures to now taking it to 5? Like, what are some things to avoid finding yourself in that spot?
Yeah. So probably the biggest mistake is not preparing, right? A lot of them will just throw out an ad and just hire the first guy that'll take the job. And I got to tell you that normally that's a recipe for disaster. Even if they are lucky and the first person they hire is just this rock star and he comes out the gate, hitting the ball out of the park, you still got an issue with being able to scale that. And
Mm-hmm.
also, there's a lot of prep that's necessary to create the right foundation so that as you build it, you don't end up saying to yourself, my gosh, look at what I've built. It's a nightmare. And
Yeah,
so,
right. Really
one of
Frankenstein monster situation there. You're like,
yeah, I mean,
you know.
how do I get that thing under control, right? And I mean,
Yeah,
it really
yeah.
happens. I mean, these things can really get out of control very, very easily. So
Mm-hmm.
your best bet's to try to prepare. And I think probably one of the biggest mistakes that I see is they don't have the right mindset. And I got to tell you that, I've been in the game now coming up on 38, 39 years. And the one thing that I've learned most is mindset's everything, because, the way you think and what you're thinking about is really what ends up becoming your reality. So one of the things that they've got to get used to is the idea of giving up the control of handing the sales off to somebody else. And that
Mm-hmm.
requires a lot of discipline, because what's going to happen is typically, you got to remember, you've been doing this for a while as the educator, right? So then you bring on a new sales guy, and no matter how much and how hard you try to train them, if you prepare to properly train them, which most don't,
Yeah.
which is one of the other mistakes we'll talk about in a minute. But you're going to end up, no matter how hard you train them, you're going to end up overhearing them make mistakes, and they're going to burn some leads in the process. I don't care really how good they are; they're still going to make some mistakes, because look, it's the first time that they're doing it, right? At least with you and your company and your product, and so it's very difficult for that. For that entrepreneur to not want to just jump in, take things over, and go, well, I don't want to see, they have that fear of, oh, I'm
Yeah.
losing money. They don't understand to take that step backwards, to take 2 steps forward, and that there's going to be some of that, whether you like it or
Mm-hmm.
not. There's going to be some waste there. Now, you can mitigate these things by not doing the second mistake. And the second mistake is, not deciding the right culture, because with the right culture, if you don't pay attention to your culture, what you're going to end up happening is, again, you're going to start to build this thing. And as you build it, it's going to end up being, well, like I said earlier, quite the nightmare, because if you don't have the right culture right from the early stage foundation building of things, you're going to end up with a team of folks that you're not really the type that you really want representing you or your brand. And so you've got to decide what the type of culture is that you want. And then the third and final thing is being salesman ready. right? Do you have all of the things in place to actually bring salespeople aboard, to train them, to, give them any kind of guidance with respect to SOPs and things like that? So to go back to deciding on the culture, you kind of have one or two choices when it comes to the culture, right? You can have that type of culture that's what I call the old school boiler room, the Wolf of Wall Street type of one call close, super aggressive, take no prisoners type of culture. Or you can build a culture where the staff that you have is actually takes some real interest and is caring about the future of the student, and their success and what they're going to have to go through. And also, I got to tell you that that when you have that type of a culture with respect to the nurturing and the caring type of culture for the students and looking out for their best self-interest first, one of the end results you'll see of this over time is it really builds the lifetime value of the customer to the company. So it really sets it up for more of a win-win situation for three reasons. One, the customers always, the more successful the customer is, the more success stories you have, the easier it is for you to grow your business. Two, the salespeople are happy because, they actually get to see and how exciting it is to watch somebody go from, for lack of better terms, a nobody as a student, brand new, never done this before. A lot of them don't even know how to spell business, right? Now you're putting them into business for themselves, and then you get to watch how that is life-changing for them.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you that when you experience that, that's more exciting than even making the money, right?
I bet. Well, because it's one, I imagine, establish the culture that you want. Which, hey, if it's boiler room, you want a Wolf of Wall Street people, at least hire the salespeople that want that same thing and bring them in, or have that mindset beforehand. But I think the flip side too, if you want something that's very different, and I would encourage to create a really strong LTV, giving that opportunity to know that, hey, you're hiring somebody that's not only going to sell it just as good, if not better than you, but you're growing somebody to grow in your business. That seems really fantastic.
Do you have any tips for when you're hiring salespeople, like when you're actually going through the interview process, that you're bringing in someone poised to succeed in the right culture? So you're not putting a, Wolf of Wall Street closer into a culture that won't fit that, or vice versa?
Yeah, so I think that, it's important in the interview process to lay into, what kind of culture that you have and what you're looking for. And then, throughout the process, you'll be able to come up, especially after you've been through a few interviews and kind of gotten your feet wet, you'll be able to start getting more creative with the type of questioning that you ask, the order in which you're asking those questions, and the timing. That kind of gives you a little bit of the telltale signs as to, is this the type of person that's actually going to care, or are they just going to tell me what I want to hear in the interview? I will tell you, this is not the easiest thing.
Right.
And there's what I call professional interviewers out there, right, where they sound great in the interview, but you tell them to get on the playing field, and they again, just fall flat on their face. And I will tell you, there does become a point in time where you just got to go ahead and say, you know what, I got to give this guy a shot. And sometimes you're just going to have to realize that, when you're hiring salespeople, you're going to end up playing the numbers game. I mean, the amount of retention that you're going to have for real keepers, is not very, very high. Probably 1, maybe 2 out of 10.
Oh, wow.
So one of the things that you're going to have to do, and we'll talk about it some more as we go through this process that I'm explaining, you're going to have to get good at hiring fast and firing fast. If you're talking to a true professional salesperson, and they're being truthful with you, they're giving you complete transparency. They'll tell you, hey, look, I'm experienced enough. I've been around the block. They'll tell you a lot about their background. So, you just tell me what it is, how you want me to operate. And our company's this way. A lot of the guys that we have within our sales organization have 20 plus years of experience, right? So they pretty much learned just about every type of sales approach that you could take. They can do that old school boiler room, take no prisoners type of approach, or they can be as soft and nurturing as you want. And so a professional will tell you, just tell me exactly, at what level you want me to perform at, and I'll meet those needs. Because most of your professional sales guys are looking for a home. They're not looking for somewhere where they're going to be around just a year or two.
Yeah. They want something that they can sell and that will be sold, and then, that they're going to continually make commission off of, I would imagine.
Well, another thing that I think a lot of people overlook is that salespeople historically are not treated very well at most companies. They bring in all the money. They're the reasons that most people get a paycheck that aren't in sales to keep the lights on. And a lot of times they're treated the worst out of anybody. So when a salesman finds a company where they're actually valued and they can tell that the company actually cares about their well-being, I got to tell you, that goes a long way with keeping the salespeople with respect to retention. So as long as the money's there, if you add that to it, you'll have very, very low turnover for the ones that actually can, perform.
Nice.
I was curious. I don't know if this is the right time to ask this, but I'm curious on when you're building out the structure and for the team, how do you coach people through the compensation models for the sales team? And I know that's a big hang up for people. They want to pay a compelling amount, but they don't want to overpay on the commission piece.
Before, I'd like to, there's a couple follow-ups I just wanted to hit
Sure.
up before we go into that. Just one real quick one is just, you'd mentioned that, once you get more experience with interviewing, you start to, learn some kind of questions and things based on your sales process to kind of throw people off. And I think we use to kind of almost disrupt that professional interviewer mentality, as well as I think seeing a salesperson and what they do when they're under pressure and things aren't working well is great. Can you give us just any specific examples? I know sometimes it's tough because it's going to be business specific, but just some examples, some really good questions that you've maybe asked in the past, or that you like to ask when it fits, maybe you ask more often.
Yeah, so I think probably the best way to go about it is that, if you have a concern about the behavior of maybe the way a salesperson would the behavior that they would perform with in a certain situation, is just ask them, if this were to happen, how would you handle that? And so that can be a variety of different things, right? But I think that if you put it in such a way where they're kind of put on the spot, where they weren't expected to be put on the spot, with let's go down a pretend moment here, and hypothetically, if XYZ were to happen, tell me how you'd respond to the customer that way.
Gotcha. So giving them a challenging situation with appropriate specifics that ideally they'll have to answer that could throw them off some. So, I mean, and again, I hate to press you, it's always tough. Can you think of any examples of just a specific question that stands out to you when you kind of think about this and maybe you've asked in some recent interviews?
Yeah, so I maybe might ask I might ask them how they would handle somebody that within the first few seconds of the conversation, what's this whole thing going to cost me, right? Or something like that. Are they going to be confrontational, or are they going to respond in such a way that they kind of put the customer at ease? At the start, they'll have to put the conversation almost on hold, and let's have that conversation before we move forward. Something to the nature of, well, wait a minute, I'm not even sure that you qualify to work with our program. Let me ask you, have you ever owned your own business before? No? Well, let me ask you, what makes you think you're qualified to be a business owner in the first place?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, exactly. Perfect. No, that helps out a ton. So with that, we'll go back to Thomas's question too, in terms of the commission structure. So I always think that's super interesting when hiring, especially if you're doing it for your first time, your first salesman. Salesperson, how do you get that right compensation structure?
Yeah, so I think that what you want to do is you want to come up with how much money that you think that the salesperson needs to make in order for them to be happy. Again, in order for them to feel like this is a place that's a new home, not just another job, right? So a lot of obviously that has to do with is what kind of income that they can make. You've already got a bit of a track record of what kind of sales revenue you've been producing. And then I would reverse engineer, the dollar amount of what you think they should be making a year into how much you've been producing. And I would assume that you probably want them, again, it depends on how much revenue you've been doing, but if you think you're really doing well at it, you might want to assume they're going to produce 80% of what you're producing, and then just reverse engineer the numbers down to a commission. A lot of things that one of the I think the better models is to make sure that you have a sliding scale so that they do have something to constantly chase and they don't get into some kind of a comfort zone. But
Is
that's
that
how
sliding?
that's how I
Is that
would go
sliding scale
about it.
based on like the target for them to? Does that mean like their target to earn
Right. So if they
commission?
hit XYZ amount, the commission goes up a few points.
Gotcha.
If
So there's
they,
some. Mhm.
and just moving it all the way on up to the ladder of, somewhere in the middle is kind of where you want them at on that sliding scale. And then if they're producing above that, they make more money, they get a higher commission. And now you're even happier because these are really top performing producers.
Gotcha. And what's your opinion on like a base commission, like a base salary plus commission or only commission?
Yeah,
Or
I'm completely against any kind of base salary.
okay, so you like to go for a full commission only kind of structure?
Yeah, because here's what's the problem with that. The problem with that is that when you do hire on any kind of a base, let me back up and say that I would be willing to entertain the base on somebody that's extremely experienced. In fact, if I think they know more than me, and this kind of goes back to the way that not getting, I was telling you one of the mistakes was not being getting salesmen ready, right? So what happens is the salespeople, they go into the interview, they're promised all these tools that they're going to get to do their job, right? And this is supposed to be the things that replace that safety of some kind of a salary or hourly wage, right? And if they're a good salesperson, as long as the tools are there, they don't really care about any kind of a salary, right? Because they know that if there's a salary, then chances are the commission is going to be less. And if they're a real go-getter, they're going to want that higher commission so that a portion of their commission is not offsetting the salary. And so at the end of the day, they the problem with giving the salary is, as I stated earlier, you've got these professional interviewers, right? And so they're going to tell you what you want to hear. And then when you start hiring more than one, right? Let's say it's 5 or 6 or something like that, you've got quite the overhead with the payroll. And, it might take that salesperson a little bit of time to start producing. And then you run into a situation where you got more going out than coming in. I just think it's a lot more risky. If I was talking to an extremely a salesperson with some extreme background, I was really impressed with them in the interview, I might make an exception because the only time I ever find that making an exception is when I can tell they're because I've been through this myself before, being the sales guy, where they promised me multiple different situations where they promised me all these tools will be there. I get started, and let's say I get into a sales process where I've done everything I could. Now I need XYZ tools to finish it out and do close the sale. And those things just aren't there. So in your more seasoned people, they might say to you something like, look, and I used to do this, to be candid with you. I used to say, look, I'm going to need some kind of salary. And let me tell you why. It's not because I have any interest in your salary. All right. Because that's not going to make me the kind of money that you and I have been talking about. I want to make all that money in the commission. But here's the thing. My experience has been that if I don't have some kind of a salary, then what's going to happen is when it comes time for you to provide those tools and you don't have them ready and you have me at the bottom of your priority list because you've got all these other things going on in your business, then what happens is that unless I feel like that salary is going to motivate you to make sure that that I am sitting here in a holding pattern. I'm twiddling my thumbs and it's costing you money while I sit there
Yeah.
and do nothing.
What do you have
But
some examples of like what those tools might be in a business that sales teams are waiting for? I'm sure it's dependent on the business, but there's like an overarching thing that is often missing that a salesperson needs to do their quote unquote job and close those deals.
Yeah, so I mean, it can be a huge variety of things. There might be a situation where the company needs some kind of an adjustment to some kind of an agreement that they want the customer to sign. I've got the guy ready to go. He's ready to sign. He's ready to make payment, but I don't have a contract for the customer to sign. I've seen that happen many times. I don't have maybe some of the product description. Like I said, that first company I started with, they didn't have anything, right? So I literally had to go in there and interrupt the owner's day and say, look, I can't go any further without having these tools like a product description. I don't know what a buyer generator is that you got listed here. It just says in your bullet points, buyer generator. What the heck is a buyer generator, right? So that's just to give you some small examples. But I think to kind of circle back around, guys, to one of the big mistakes is not getting salesmen ready. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that. So I'd like to kind of focus on that for just a quick minute, because if you are not salesman ready, I'm just letting you know, they're going to go through a lot of work doing all these interviews, hiring all these people. And again, these tools won't be there. So I guess it kind of, now I think of it, it kind of touches on what you were asking. So to be salesman ready, you first thing you're going to have to do is you've now decided your culture. You're going to have to script everything. You're going to have a sales presentation. You're going to have product description. You're going to have all of the different qualifications that you want to make sure that the students that they're bringing on are truly a good fit for you, so that you don't, find yourself going back to that whole Wolf of Wall Street, just, take whoever's willing to give you their money type of students, because those students are typically problematic at the end of the day. And then in addition to that, you're going to want to make sure that you've scripted all the different drops and rebuttals and different closes and things like that. And that's a lot. I mean, to give you an example, here at our company, when we hire salespeople, we're very big on memorization. I found that the fastest way for a salesperson to lose a sale is when they lose confidence in themselves, meaning the customer asks them a question, they get caught off guard, and their knee-jerk reaction is to go, Immediately the sales gone. The customer, the prospect loses confidence in the salesperson because they're reading that the salesperson has lost their confidence, and it's strictly because they just don't know what to say. So we're very big on memorization and going back to being, the training and being salesman ready. We've run the analytics on our sales material, and it's literally about 200 words short of the Constitution. So this is the kind of, I'm not joking, this is the kind of training that we put our salespeople through. And then see, that's just step one, right? Now you know what to say, but now we got to worry about delivery. We got to worry about timing. We got to worry about the pace in which they say certain areas.
And so you're talking a bit about building out the script, quote unquote, right? Like kind of the sales script they might use, or different branching models of, this when X happens, but they're almost asking them to be not an actor, I guess, but you're asking them to kind of commit this to memory so they can pull different pieces of it, it sounds like, when and if they need to.
Right. So I mean, let me say this. Once you've internalized the information and then you start to learn your delivery, it no longer is a part of what you're saying. It's a part of who you are, and it just becomes a part of your natural vocabulary. In fact, one of the things that we encourage is to use some of this material when you're out with friends and family, not necessarily the material, but maybe the approaches and things like this. Also, as you get more advanced, you kind of start to test how far you can push the envelope without upsetting the customer or without it feeling like that they're being pressured. And the only way is to test those waters over and over and over again. And you have to do it in such a way that, you're not burning leads. So a lot of times we tell them that when you're out, like one of the things I used to constantly do throughout my career is do this as a joke with my friends. How far can I push that envelope before they start to get upset? And then about the time they start to get upset, I pull them off from going over the cliff and, let them know that I was joking type thing. And we had to just laugh together about it. But so, now you got everything scripted. You're going to also need to record all of your, not all of your, but have recordings of your presentations so that they can start to learn the delivery. They can start to learn the way and what, it's in sales, it's 10% of what you say, 90% of how you say it. Right. And so they're going to have to learn the delivery. So there's a lot of science that really goes behind the training of the salespeople. And then, the other thing that you're going to have to do is that you're going to have to make sure that you've built out tracking for the salespeople's KPIs. You're going to have to make sure that you've got a structure set up for your sales meetings and your sales training. You've got to train, at least if you want your salespeople to be of any real value with respect to, being in that upper percentage of quality of salespeople, you're going to have to constantly train. I mean, we train every single day. And so, you're going to have to set all this stuff up. And then once you're finally, and then you've got to have all of the other things that are in place for the salespeople to be able to actually not just close the sale verbally, but again, if you have contracts that you need in place, you're going to have to create those contracts for the customer to sign, or agreements or order forms, or whatever you want to label those documents. And so now you're salesman ready, right? Now you're finally ready to start running ads, right? You start ready to do the interviews, and then you're going to start going through that learning process. Because again, you've never done this before, right? And now you're going to have to go through that learning process of how to identify what's a good hire and what's a bad hire. And I got to tell you, I've yet to see it be a complete science. I've had people that I thought wasn't probably a very good hire, but I said just enough where I said, let me give the guy a shot. He ends up being a rock star. I've had other people where this guy is going to be dynamite. I get all excited about him, and then I get on the playing field, and like I said, they just fall on their face. So sometimes you just got to just take the approach of pull them in, and then just get good at hire fast, fire fast. And then
it's almost like if you have the trust that you have the right systems in place, you've given them training, they have the right incentive. At that point, you just need to get the right person. So fast in, fast out behooves you versus holding on, which I imagine sometimes when you're getting your first or second hire, that hire fast, fire fast could be pretty challenging because you might not feel confident that you have the other systems in place. Would you say that's pretty common with the people that are doing it the first time? And then kind of my question would be is, does that start to change when they hit to that 7 to 8 figure range when you're looking at making that next leap?
Yeah. So the answer is yeah. I mean, you're going to go through a lot of trial and error when you haven't done this stuff before, just like anything else that you're brand new at, right? And so that was what I was about to say is that you probably don't know how to do any of this stuff. You're going to have to learn as you go. So be prepared to start this process and do it over and over again until you actually get it down, right? And then once you've got it down, now you're starting to be able to build a sales team. And when you start to transition from your 6 to 7 figure when you start to go through transitioning from a 6 to 7 figure business, where you should be at that point is you should have somewhere between 4 and 10 salespeople working for you. About 50% of them should be fully trained. If you've done a good job in building your culture, probably 4 to 5 out of those, 5 to 10. What I have found is a rock solid pattern that the foundation for a sales team is typically going to be about 4 to 5 guys that are fully trained. If done a good job in your culture, they're extremely loyal, and they'll end up being permanent fixtures within the organization. And so that gives you a foundation to build from, right? One of the things I probably should have mentioned that when you're doing the interviewing process, when you're first getting started, start to try to look for telltale signs that might be somebody that might be management quality down, have some management qualities for down the road, whether it be a sales manager or team lead or something of that nature. And then the other thing that I want to also touch on that I think is important before we move into, transitioning into a 7-figure company is you've got to decide what kind of a sales model that you want. So there's 3 types of salespeople that you can hire. You've got your setters. These are folks that basically call, identify interest. If they don't have interest, spend a little bit of time, short period of time of trying to create interest and then qualify whether or not they're qualified to work for the company. And the end result of their conversation should be to either do a live transfer to a closer and or schedule an appointment for that person to talk with the closer. The closer's job is to basically take somebody that's already been qualified and then recover and identify why the customer would be a good fit. You want to make sure you identify things like the reason they want to do the business, their pain, what are they going to get out of this more than money? Because a lot of people don't realize that money is just a vehicle to get you where you want to be in life, right? And so you need to know the reasons why. What are some of the things that they're missing out of their life that they really want? That's the reason that they're really buying. Remember, people buy off emotion and justify it with facts, right? And so their job is to, kind of pull that back out of the customer because maybe it's been a little bit of time that's went by from when they talked with the setter to the closer, right? So we got to bring those emotions back to the front side of the conversation. And then what happens is their job is to obviously explain the program and close the sale. And then you have the third type of salesperson that you'd hire, which is what I call a hybrid. And this is somebody that can do the setting and the closing. They can do it all from start to finish, from hello to goodbye. And I always recommend that folks go with a hybrid type sales team, especially at the start. And here's why.
Yeah.
Once you get to the start where you're ready to transition from a 6 to a 7-figure business, if you start out with nothing but setters and closers, you're going to find yourself with an imbalance one day. Maybe somebody's quit, got fired, got sick. I remember one time I had a guy get COVID and he was out for 6 weeks. He was a closer. So I ended up with too many appointments and not enough closers to attend the appointments. Where had it been a hybrid guy, they can do it all, right? So they can handle the setting, they can handle the closing, they can handle it all. And so if you start out with that foundation, you probably will be in a position where if you end up, having to move people around on the chessboard as far as your sales team, you've got that foundation where that you can plug into that starter team for that extra help. So by the time that you are ready to transition from a 6 to a 7 figure business, you should probably be at that point, like I said, with about 5 to 10 salespeople, somewhere in there. And again, at least 4 or 5 of them should be fully trained. Again, if you did a good job in building the culture, they're extremely loyal. They'll be permanent fixtures within the organization. That acts as your foundation where you're going to build from there. You should be at that point with respect to production, sales, production revenues. You probably should be somewhere between about $200 to maybe as much as $700,000 a month in revenue.
On a regular basis, like if you're not
consistent.
Gotcha.
That's another thing. When I say that these folks are fully trained, and if you've done a good job with the culture and they're permanent fixtures within the organization, your numbers every month should be extremely consistent, unless something goes real haywire with your market.
Gotcha.
So as long as the leads,
at least when you're looking, because that also could help. You might be just experiencing maybe a viral swell, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the business is ready to go to hiring a sales team, so on and so forth, that kind of stuff.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Like, just because what you're saying is you might have like a swell, like maybe an affiliate promoted something, it did really, really well, so it looks like you're going to have a great month. But if you're not seeing that consistently, it's not to say that you're really at that level if you're not hitting it month by month.
Yeah, that's right. And yeah, I got to tell you, it's all going to start with the amount of leads that you're producing on a regular basis is going to dictate the consistency in your sales production, assuming that your salespeople, again, are fully trained and you've built the right culture to where, they're permanent fixtures within the organization. The reason that I bring up this whole permanent fixture within the organization is if you don't get to a point where you have what I call a skeleton crew that is just permanent fixtures within the organization, it's going to be very difficult to build from there. And so this is probably what I would say is one of the hardest things to accomplish in the business when you're going from 6 to 7 is getting that initial skeleton crew that's going to be around for a long time. Nice. Once you do that, now you got something that you can start to duplicate. And I will tell you the next mistakes that I see when they want to go from a 6 to a 7 is there is another, again, mind shift change that they've got to make. And what they need to do is the mind shift change that they're going to have to make is they're going to have to start thinking bigger, right? And part of that is start to thinking big ticket sales, right? And so they're going to have to start thinking and being comfortable with the idea of creating bigger upsales, doing bigger packages, and also increasing their pricing. Okay. And I got to tell you, this is a real struggle that I see these early stage educators go through. For whatever reason, they have a limiting belief on the value that they're bringing to the table. And I actually have to walk them through this really almost like a psychiatrist because they don't really realize what they're bringing to the table. I think that they're just so used to it being just a part of their everyday life. It's not what they do, it's who they are. They don't realize that, what they're really providing their student. I mean, we're talking about providing with them with a life-changing opportunity. You go into business for yourself. It's not because you're happy with your 9 to 5, right? You're wanting to do better. You're wanting to create a better life for yourself and your family. You're wanting that financial freedom, right? And so they got to be okay with charging for that. And so part of the things, one of the talks that I take them through is I kind of have what I call a tough love talk with them. And I say, well, let me ask you a question. So when you I ask them, how much money did you make when you were doing the business yourself? And whether that number is $1 million in a year or, $5 million over the 4 years I was doing it or 10 million, whatever that number is, I ask them, bluntly. So when you tell me that, are you lying? No. Okay. Well, good. Okay. That's a good start, right?
Yeah. Right. Which sometimes I imagine that might not be the answer. Oh yeah, no.
Well, I gotta say, if I do hear that answer, I typically run the opposite direction as fast as I can.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
but at any rate, it's kind of bringing them into the reality of things. And I asked them, so when you built out your course, did you actually duplicate your systems, your procedures, your model, and everything in your course, or did you leave anything out? And they tell me yes. Okay. And so, all right, so then your program works, right? Yeah. Okay. Well, let me ask you this. If a student came to you and he says, if you think I'm the right person for this business, would you recommend I do this business, or would you recommend that I go and get a, college education and just get a job? And they'll say, no, I believe that this business is, the best business in the world, or I, wouldn't have invested all this time making it, my whole world. Right. And so I said, well, okay, what about going into some other kind of business instead of this business? Do you think that's the right move? No, I think this is the best business to go into for all of these different reasons. You can make all of this money. You're not having to, put yourself in a situation where you're always working 60 hours a week, which you can very easily do in corporate America and things like this. And then, once we've kind of had that discussion, then I'll ask them, well, by the way, what does it cost for college these days? The average college education, what's that run? A couple $100,000 a year? A lot of people say,
framing up that value, right? It's like, man,
right.
People are going to spend that. Why would they not spend it with you? Yeah, for sure.
Right. And then I'll ask them, how about what's the cost of a franchise these days, right? Several $100,000 to several $1 million. In fact, I'll even tell them a story. I've got a couple of friends of mine here in Houston that opened up a neighborhood sports bar. They were from the bar industry, and it was 3 guys that opened it. All 3 of their girlfriends worked in the bar industry. And so there were 6 of them, right, that were totally vested, right? And when I asked them how much they spent to open their bar, and by the way, this is just a neighborhood sports bar, nothing fancy, but not a dive either. These guys spent $600,000 and told me they barely made it, and that's with 6 of them willing to basically work for next to nothing. Right. And so I say to him, so knowing that it costs a couple $100,000 to get a college education, to get a job, knowing that it costs, several $100,000 to several $1 million to a franchise, knowing that opening up a neighborhood sports bar costs $600,000+, doesn't it make you feel a lot better about charging for one of your more advanced programs, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000? Doesn't that seem like a pretty good deal to you? And, kind of really kind of wakes them up and they see the light. And they got to get over that mind shift, or what has happened. I've seen a few of them that didn't get over the mind shift. And that's how I kind of came up with this conversation that I just kind of, for lack of better terms, kind of role played with you there for a second. And because I've seen them literally, like, especially at a live event on stage, like, they were confident throughout the entire education process, throughout the entire time. And then when it came time to present the package, do the drop, I mean, their tone of voice, their level of confidence just went completely into the dirt.
Right at the close.
Yeah, I've crashing it. Yeah.
And so, like I said, so mindset's a really, really big deal. And you've got to transition your mindset from the 6 to 7 figure and the 7 to 8 and the 8 to 9, right? Yeah. And so they got to start thinking of big ticket. They got to get used to the idea of charging, having bigger and better packages, and also raising their prices. Now, for some of the folks that might watch this that haven't been into this, haven't gotten their business model this far, typically there's about 4 tiers you're going to do your packaging in of your training, coaching, and mentoring. And the first stage is just your standard, what I call home study course. It's basically a series of videos and maybe a year's worth of email support, or maybe a Facebook support group. That's tier 1, kind of a do-it-yourself, right? And then stage 2 is they get all of the, they get the course, they get the support, but now that you start implementing some of the coaching, some of your small group coaching, some of your one-on-one coaching. And so that's where you take it up a notch with respect to, again, the size of the package and the pricing. The third stage is, or tier is typically, where you start to provide some done with you services, right? Where you're doing a little bit more hand holding and doing some of the work side by side with them, which falls into a little bit of the excuse me, I'm sorry, let me restate that. Stage 2 or tier 2 is coaching, which is doing the work with them, side by side.
Is that one-on-one or more one-on-one or group for stage 2?
So stage 2 is typically a blend, right? Stage 2, I
Okay.
would start out my beginner package in stage 2 being small group coaching. And
Yep.
then what I would
Okay.
do is, as they get more experience with the small group coaching, just like if you were to go to college, right? Sign up for a college course and you're just not getting it. What's the next logical stage, right? Hire a tutor,
Mhm.
which is the same thing as one-on-one coaching, right? And so, for the folks that need that extra help on the one-on-one coaching or want to move the ball down the field with their business quicker, getting that one-on-one time with a coach is definitely going to help you move the ball down the field quicker and help you get a clearer understanding. So it's either or.
Mhm.
But I feel like they fall within the same tier. The third tier is done for you, right? Where you're doing a
Mhm.
lot of the services, if not all of the services for them. And
Yeah.
then the fourth and final tier is the done with you and a done for you combined package, where the
Gotcha.
company is doing the business for you over here while you're in the background learning the business, doing it side by side with them with the coaching
Nice.
assignment.
So we teach you while we do it at the same time, kind of thing. So,
Right.
It's like a
real fast.
partnership model in a way.
Again,
Yeah. Mhm.
yeah, Rich, really appreciate it. I realize we've been having this conversation. We're getting close to the end on time, and we haven't given people that kind of the 8 to 9 figure jump. So, in the sake of time, if you could give me just like a real quick, like, and I hate to shrink it down, but give me like one thing or one big transition, maybe even that mindset shift, because we talked about the mindset from 6 to 7. It's like, hey, it's not just you. And then when you start going from that 7 to 8 range, it's like you're a lot more than what you think you are, which I imagine sometimes you're like, I just want to get a sale. Now you're like, no, you're actually really good at this. You're bringing more value than you recognize. What's the mindset shift that you have to take from the 8 to 9 steps? And then from there, we'll use that as our last question, and kind of work through that, and then tell the people how they could get a hold of you if they want. Like, I need more information. I want to talk to you more. We'll give the people how
Sure.
they could do that as well.
Yeah, so I got to tell you, the shift from 8 to 9, I got to tell you, that requires some real soul searching. And I'm going to kind of speed up the rate at which I'm talking because I'm running out of time here. I probably should have, there's a lot more I can talk about. I probably should have paid more attention to the clock. I apologize.
No, it's
But
okay. No worries.
it's nothing that somebody can't hop on a call with me and we can
Mhm.
take a deeper dive on some of the stuff that I'm going to have to skip over here. But it's some real soul searching. What I mean by that is you got to make a decision right now. If you're at that stage where you're at 8 figures, right, and you want to move to, you're considering moving to 9, you're already making quite a bit of money at this point, right? And so you got to really ask yourself, do I want to stay where I'm comfortable at right now? I could continue to do this forever and live a really, really good life, right? Or do I really want to go big? Do I really want to blow this thing up? Do I want to start heading down the road of becoming a household name? And so at that point, the soul searching that you have to do is make that decision. And if you are going to make that decision, it comes down to this. You're going to have to give up all control. Because what's going to happen is you're going to have to start bringing on C-level people. And the reason is my experience has been to get into that 100 million plus a year mark, you're probably going to have to start creating additional businesses that are somewhat related to what your core business is and or acquiring other businesses. And it's going to take those C-level people that have an expertise in that particular business that you're going to either be building that's unfamiliar territory for you and or, the businesses that you'd be acquiring. And so you're going to have to start really, again, backing up even further where that 7 to 8 figure you're managing from a 1,000 foot view. Now you're going to have to be managing from a 10,000 foot view, and you're just going to have to completely delegate, right? And so I think that that's the mind shift that you're going to have to go through to get to that point. And so yeah, it's a big move.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I imagine it's really, we've seen at each transition, the mindset is giving up a little bit more, right? Each time, from doing everything to, well, let me just replicate what I do to other people, to then, okay, well, now it's like what you're doing is worth more. So we have to shift again a further stretch away. Your time close up has to mean and cost a lot more, to where now it's, you're transitioning to a point where it's like your time should never be involved in day to day. Like, you are much, much bigger. All that stuff seems delegated away. So definitely that bigger transition of it's not removal from the business, but just distance from where you started making that first sale to where you are at the 9-figure range. So again, really appreciate the time. We had so much we talked about here, Rich. It was fantastic. Learned tons of stuff. And I think I don't know about you, Thomas, but as a sales professional, there are lots of things I was thinking, like, that's really interesting. How are we doing that in our own sales structure? So, and then circling back here, I think one of the big things, one of the big things that I really took away here is just this idea that when you're early on, it makes more sense to start with the sales team, whether you're hiring your own, whether you're hiring an agency that does this, so much sooner than I think businesses think that they could bring it in, because it brings revenue, it brings it right away, and it challenges you to really understand your own sales process to a different level so other people could do it as well. I think it really, really opened my eyes to an amazing early step. So with that being said, Thomas, any other things that you took away before we tell the people how they can get a hold of Rich if they'd like to? And we'll give you an opportunity to tell a little bit of people about that as well, Rich.
I just love the focus on, what people might call the boring stuff, right? Like the operational processes, like what actually needs to be in place for a successful salesperson to have success. Because that's what we see a lot in the space, or probably any space. It's like you have the sales team going, oh, this doesn't work because of XYZ reason. You've got the owners going, my sales team isn't working because they're not working hard enough or they're not good enough. And just gets caught in this blunder of just this hiring, firing phase without ever fixing the root problem, which is what are the tools and the trainings and the systems that they actually need to thrive and succeed in your organization. So I think being able to focus on that or chat with someone like yourself who can help them build that out and then execute at a high level.
Yeah, for sure. So no, I think it was perfect, because again, guys, it's like some of the stuff, I think what I really heard from Susan is like, you might think it's easy to just hire a salesperson, and it's maybe easy to hire somebody, but to have success with them takes a lot more work. Not necessarily, there's some things in the hiring process, but I felt like the biggest thing here is it's the tools that they need from the get-go to make your salespeople not only more effective, but less expensive. So more effective, less expensive, have the systems in place to get done. So Rich, for people listening to this and thought, wow, that sounds great, I want to have a sales team, or hey, I think there's a lot that I'm missing from the sales team I have right now, and they want to talk to you, they want to connect with you, they want to learn more to really, really expand on this part of their business, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can obviously you can give me a call. My phone number is area code 832-641-5377. Again, Rich Kerr. You can take a look at our website. It has some contact information on there to contact us. Our website is theprosperityclubllc.com. Again, that's theprosperityclubllc.com. And or you can email me at richard.kerr, that's Kerr, at theprosperityclubllc.com.
Beautiful. Perfect. Well, fantastic. Well, awesome. Thanks so much again for the time, everybody. And be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and reach out to Rich. I mean, dude gave his phone number just on the podcast right here. So obviously go use it, store it, send him lots of memes. No, just kidding. Don't do that. But really appreciate the time, Rich. Until next time, what do we tell the people, Thomas?
Happy scaling.
Happy scaling. All right. Thanks so much, guys. Have a good one.
Thanks, guys.